Thank you, Coca-Cola, for leaving the Cokes up on the table. That's very helpful. My name is not serving me well in the United States. It's Schimmelpenninck, and it's very difficult to spell it out on the phone here. So I get all the immigrants that changed their name and simplified it once they were off the boat. I might change it into Schimmel at a certain point. I'm Director of Talent Insights and Research at Activision. And before that, I was leading a team of talent intelligence professionals at Philips, Dutch electronics company, out of Amsterdam. Been a consultant before in the sort of the human capital space, advising portfolio companies for private equity companies. And before that, I started off my career as a research analyst at Egon Zehnder. It's a big executive search company from Switzerland, but they also had an office in Amsterdam. That's where I started out. So I made a big change coming from MRI scanners and CT scanners to the world of games. I'm not a big gamer, to be honest. I asked if that was a problem during my interviews, but they said no, and they reached out to me. So, I'm learning a lot. It's a fascinating world. Activision has basically three big subsidiaries. It's Activision Publishing, Blizzard, and King, and you all know these, or many of you will know these franchises like Call of Duty and Candy Crush, and we're being acquired by Microsoft, so we're in the window between sign and close. It's taking over a year, but I have good faith that will close soon. So let's talk a little bit about talent intelligence at Activision. I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with the function of talent intelligence. I hope to shine a light on that today as well. I started out as a function under the talent and succession planning, but quickly moved under people analytics. I think it's a very good home to be in. And I started out basically developing location strategy and recruitment strategy. Those are basically the easy wins if you start a talent intelligence function at a company to make an impact, especially through location strategy. And that will be pretty much the subject of my speech today. And this year, I'm going to further develop the competitive intelligence side of talent intelligence, or the use of it. So first, a little bit about talent intelligence and people analytics. So talent intelligence is basically the external version of people analytics. So people analytics looks inward and analyzes the workforce in many different ways, answers questions that leadership might have, creates all sorts of dashboards and insights. And talent intelligence basically uses the external world to bring that lens to the company and also bring those insights into the company. And what is a good reason why they are together and married? That's not very normal. So at Philips, they were very distant worlds, and I'm super happy that we're one team. There are many advantages, and I think one of them is that people analytics is very good at building their own tools. Talent intelligence, data is basically, external data is increasingly getting better. We're scraping a lot of data, we're putting it in huge data lakes, and it allows for people analytics techniques to be applied to that external talent intelligence, and that creates wonderful insights, and then you can sort of apply it to people analytics dashboards, create that external lens to internal information, stuff that leadership likes to see, because leadership always think, okay, this is great, I now know about the makeup of our people or a certain metric, but how does it compare? Is it normal, yes or no? And hopefully I can then answer that question, like how we're doing against like the median or etc. A people analytics team often is very well networked into an organization. So if you're starting out a talent intelligence function, it's nice to have them partnered up with the people analytics people because they are already so established. Challenges are that people analytics and talent intelligence basically work very differently. And one of the things is people analytics has a lot of data. And when you have that data, you go look for a certain thing because you know you have the data to basically look for it. Talent intelligence is much more sort of a research-based function. So you first venture out basically in the world of data, see if you have enough data, and then make the analysis, and then get these insights. It's a bit of a different way. It attracts also a little bit different people. And then the quality of data, I mean, your own data will always be of significant better quality than external data. Even though that's increasing in the right, that's improving in the right direction for talent intelligence. There are basically three main pillars for talent intelligence. One is location strategy that we're going to do a deep dive in today. The other is recruitment strategy, understanding composition of other places or other companies. We build a big skill similarity model at Activision together with McKinsey to unlock other talent pools and bring them into our world through upskilling. And also with that, improving our DE&I metrics and things like that. But also really, our hiring managers have a very exact idea of what they're looking for. And by giving that sort of skill similarity model, we open up their minds a little. Competitive intelligence, you can do an enormous amount of things. You can recreate org designs. I know Siemens is in the room, and when I was working at Philips, we would sort of figure out their go-to-market strategy by recreating their org designs and following it, creating trends over time, seeing their teams grow and get smaller, and seeing, oh, interesting, they're going to that market, what's going on there? Should we go there as well? And the makeup of their teams and how they would approach clients and things like that. It's very interesting. But also for M&A, right? You can, before your official due diligence process starts, you can figure out so much about that company, even before the CEO sends out the letter to the CEO of the to-be acquired company. We would basically have the whole integration plan already ready at Philips. Battle cards might be something you are familiar with, more the talent acquisition professionals, and know about other companies. If you speak with candidates from other companies, you are better informed using battle cards that have some basic information about compensation and title structures and all these kind of things. And I see an emergence of a fourth pillar, and that is one that I'm experiencing right now, being together with people analytics, which is much more on sort of reporting and evolving the company, the function of talent intelligence, much more basically into like a labor market specialist, and reporting on talent flows and looking at the talent market much more sort of as a fluid dynamics kind of thing, where we're not chasing the talent, but we're seeing where it goes in terms of companies and places, and we're more sort of trying to move the bucket in the right direction and catching it instead of the chase. And in order to do that, you need to map those flows out, and you can do that these days. It's not, you have to acquire certain data sets, but it's definitely possible to do it. So yeah, and then just sort of integrate all your findings into executive reportings and things like that. Okay, enough about that. Let's sort of dive into location strategy, because that is the main subject of my talk right now. So I wanted to move away from just the data. The data is out there, right? So you can have access to all sorts of platforms that will show you talent availability, talent demand, competition in the local labor market, that will help you form a ranking for a certain location decision. What I want to talk a bit more about is the stakeholder management that goes around it. And I've done dozens of location strategy pieces, and I just want to share with you my main learnings here and a model that has eventually worked for me. And And I'm also happy or very interested to hear your reactions to it, and maybe you have questions or remarks. So what I found is that a location decision is a pretty difficult, sort of a bit of a pickle of a situation, basically. It sounds simple and straightforward, but there's a lot more that comes to it. I found that emotions and hierarchy and bias suddenly pop up with people that are perfectly sort of rational and reasonable people normally. Even things like where people are from are suddenly a thing. And the way I basically found that works is to build a model that really engages everybody, all the decision makers, all the stakeholders. It's a model that basically can expand. You can sort of add data sets that people find important, and therefore sort of move the emotion and the bias out of the conversation and get it more towards the actual data points that should drive a decision in the interest of the business, because that's what we're doing in the end. So let's start about talking a bit more about that first part. So the difficult and complex landscape of a location decision. So there may be many reasons, right? There's offshoring or reshoring or nearshoring. You want to go to a place where there's more talent. If in economic dire times, you want to maybe go to a place where there's cheaper talent. There are many reasons why you want to basically change your locations or enhance it or expand. And as soon as that happens, there are many opinions and interests. Everybody has an opinion about locations. And the funny thing, if you work for an international organization with many nationalities, people suddenly become patriotic. So they are from, I'd say, Romania, and they feel it's their sort of patriotic duty to have company ABC that you work for have their hub for IT professionals in Romania, right? And anything suddenly goes in that regard. And if these people are in a position of power, that is suddenly a thing, and it obstructs, in my mind, a bit the interest of the business. So that's a thing you have to sort of think about. And then the risk is that you make the wrong decision based on the wrong assumptions and a bit of a power play. And then there's also like a location decision is one of the few things a leader really will tell to their children or grandchildren later. Like, I opened up this new office or this new factory in Singapore, right? It's a big thing. People really want to make that decision. They're eager to do it. So it's good to be aware of that, because people are eager to do it, and sometimes it's actually not a good thing to do. And often a location strategy piece can actually come to the conclusion that we're pretty well set up and that we shouldn't really move and make that huge investment. So it's just good to be aware as a data leader that brings all that information to the table and also manages this whole process, to be very much aware of that. So the role of the data leader is to bring calm and a methodology that everybody can buy into, and a numerical basis to the discussion and the final decision. And I'll be talking about that on a later point. So the second part is the emotions. Just to talk a little bit about it, I already mentioned a couple of things. I'm going to use an actual case study that I had at a previous company that I worked for that you can now figure out which one that is. So we wanted to have certain hubs, and it would involve a lot of people across the world. So it was about 4 hubs on different continents. So we had functional leaders with data preferences, a business unit leader who would lead these hubs eventually with very strong opinions, and then there's your CFO that basically need to sign off on it, and a CEO that is the ultimate capital allocator, and that is the person that eventually will make the decision. And that's basically the end of your roadshow where you'll make your presentation, and that person will sort of hammer it off. The solution to it basically was build the best model we could that could cater to all the questions and the requests a model that speaks for itself, creates a ranking, an outcome that you can use to make that final decision. And you want to keep it positive in a forward-looking narrative without treading on toes, and with a buy-in from everybody involved. And the way to get that buy-in was to create a model that sort of can expand with all the data requests. This is a bit of a text-heavy slide. I'm sorry about this. It goes against all the rules of making a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm sorry. The Coca-Cola slides are really, really cool. I mean, this is just, we're going back to basics. So, what were my learnings, right, of this during this process, right? So there's a lot of obstructive and opportunistic data hunger in a process like that. So if a person wants to have that hub in Romania, right, they'll say, can you look at it through this lens, and they know that their location will come up favorable. And then instead of having a conversation at the table with everybody and say, no, we shouldn't look at this, you say, yes, let's add that. That's a good idea. Let's add that way of looking at it to the model. And then later we'll apply a weighting to it. And that will be the discussion. It will be the discussion of how we're going to apply the weighting to it. I don't have to talk about the roadshow. I already touched about the emotions, sort of patriotism coming up, and hierarchy, catering for all the data wishes, discussed that. What I really learned is to stand your ground, take up the role of your expert, and really acknowledge that a big location decision will take time. It will need convincing of everybody. So if you want to rush it through and say, look, but this is the data, and it shows clearly it's not the way. You really need to cater for everybody's opinion. It's like have everybody heard, and take the haste out of it, and make sure that everything continues to move at whatever pace, because we're going to eventually be there and make that decision together. I studied history. I know how important a narrative is for leaders. So moving away from just that data and just thinking a little bit about the history of the company, that company already had in opening up locations in places, changing work opportunities, maybe creating universities or schools there, putting it in that larger narrative really involves leadership, and actually also makes it more positive to do, right? Because there is now a link with the history of the company, how the company used to do things, and now we're continuing doing it, and now we'll do it in the future also. And that is a thing that I found to be a big sort of thing to have the buy-in of everybody, also big critics that you'll find along the way. Yeah, and then in the end, if you do a big organization, if you do a big thing with locations, there's a big impact on people. So people need to move, or being asked to move, or being offered to move often, right? But you know that they might say no because they're not able to move. So it means that people will leave the company, and many questions will come, and they will be in the likes of why? Why are we doing this, right? And if you've done this according to these steps I've found, and you have this really buy-in of everybody, you can link it to that history, everybody really understands why they're doing it because there's that evidence, then it's so much easier to explain that why. And also if it's a difficult why, right? So that is something that, because in the end, it will impact people. Everybody loves to sort of look at a map and sort of strategize and say, here we go. But in the end, it's a big impact to people, and you want to be able to explain it well. So here is the model, basically. It's a graphic depiction of the model. It looks a lot more impressive than it actually is. it's a bit of a spider web. So in the end, it's basically to determine the attractiveness of a location, right? I'm going to take I want to drink some cola, but I'm going to stick with the water. So we did one thing. We want to do a cultural fit as well. So we did a whole cultural study based on like the Hofstede cultural traits of countries, because people needed to work for like in a Spotify kind of way, which needs like, or it helps if a country has a sort of a low hierarchy in their national culture of work. So I try to look at it through different lenses, like so this cultural lens that I highlighted just. And then there is basically two things, like you have the employer attractiveness. Okay, we want to have low salaries, basically, something like that, right? Or we want to have high talent availability. Or we want to have a low competition pressure. Or maybe we actually want to have a high competition pressure, but from the right companies, right? If it's super interesting companies, it actually can work as a magnet instead of that's a whole different discussion. But we're going to attractive cities, good universities. I will say something about the quality of the talent. So yeah, competition quality is one that I just meant. Real estate costs, all those kind of things. And then there's also the employee attractiveness thing, right? Quality of living in those locations. If we want to move people from A to B, that's going to be, if they want to move their families, that's going to be a thing for them, right? Cost of living, same thing. Purchasing power, salaries, etc., etc. So we're talking about from university rankings to talent availability to real estate costs. All these kind of things are different kind of numbers. So the way we did it is we converted them all into a Likert scale. So that's a scale from 1 to 5. And then we applied a weighting to it. And that would be the discussion that all those stakeholders would have together. They would sort of talk about that. You see all those little percentages. And it's like, how important is this to us? And that was basically the driver of the discussion. So the key takeaway is a model that accommodates for all these many data points. Accommodates for all those stakeholders' wishes and concerns that they might have for whatever reason, right? Then that reason doesn't really matter anymore. Or it matters, but in the applying of the weighting. So the discussion will be focused now on how and where to apply that weighting as a sort of a setting, and then you'll see that ranking changes a little bit. It won't change dramatically though, but it changes. And in the end, we plotted, I don't have a slide of that, but we plotted it in a matrix, and we had like the cities, and they were like larger bubbles or smaller bubbles, and then they were, if they were in the upper right corner, that would be, of course, the best place for the bubble to live. The city winners coming from that model will give some comfort, and they can now be placed in like a wider narrative. Like, oh, look, the city we have been historically tied to is maybe not performing top, but well enough to keep our presence in some form or capacity. Because we have a historic presence there, and it's when you're a 125-year-old multinational, you have some sort of obligation to history sometimes as well. And if you can sort of look at the numbers and see, like, it actually makes sense for us to stay there a little bit or continue that history. That's actually important. But also, city ABC is being one of the winners, also happens to be the city we have with a research university we already have strong ties with. Us setting up an entity there will allow us to collaborate even closer. Those are things that then sort of can be added to the mix. In the end, I believe that this model really helps decision makers to get excited and proud about their location decisions for really good reasons. They can really explain to everybody and bond rather than conflict over the outcome. I want to end my talk with it. This is a Call of Duty depiction of my hometown, Amsterdam, and it's amazing. It's just like that. So they're really good at doing that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to me. I have 5 minutes left for questions, so happy to take all your questions.